On Christmas Eve, my son's wife raised her glass and shouted, "Pay the rent or get out from her." My fork froze midair. The neighbors stopped singing on the porch. My grandson's eyes dropped to his plate. Then she slammed a manila envelope onto the table. Eviction notice. But they didn't know. I had the original deed buried in the garage wall. Whose signature was on that lease? Why now? And what were they really trying to take? The morning after Christmas, the living room felt different. Not colder, emptier. My recliner, the one I'd fixed 3 times, was gone. In its place, her purple yoga mat lay flat on the floor, incense curling up from a burner like an insult in the air. I looked toward the kitchen. Laughter. Not mine. She was blending something green and frothy, headphones in, dancing barefoot. The same floor I laid down tile by tile 20 years ago. My son sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling through his phone, cereal untouched. I stepped closer. He didn't look up. "Where's my chair?" I asked. She paused her music just long enough to say, "We needed the space." The energy in here was blocked. I looked around. My toolbox gone from the shelf. My framed photo of our family's first Christmas here, replaced with a macrame wall hanging that read "Her Sanctuary." I turned back to my son. "We need to talk alone." He exhaled like I was a chore. In a second, he said, "Jess is making us smoothies. Jess, not mom, not dad, just Jess, like a tenant, like I wasn't blood anymore." She slid a glass toward me. "It's chia and spirulina. Anti-inflammatory." I didn't touch it. "I'm not inflamed," I said. Her smile was a knife. "You are now." She walked off humming some coastal meditation song, leaving the scent of patchouli behind. I turned back to my son. "I want my files back," I said. The folder from my drawer. It had the deed and bills. He blinked slowly. Jess reorganized the office. "Maybe it's with the old receipts?" I knew it wasn't. I opened that drawer every December to review my property taxes and utilities. I kept it clean, labeled, safe. "You let her go through my papers?" I asked, stepping closer. He finally looked at me. "It's not just your space, Dad. We're a household now. Shared responsibilities." My heart sank. "You mean boundaries?" He nodded. "Exactly." Then she called out from upstairs, "Babe, can you bring me the rent check folder?" He stood. "Be right back." I stood there, alone, my smoothie still untouched. I walked outside for air. Snow had melted just enough to leave patches of wet concrete on the porch. The neighbor's Christmas lights still blinked softly. Mr. Graves, 2 houses down, gave me a nod as he picked up his morning paper. I didn't nod back. I couldn't. Inside, laughter again. Hers. An hour later, she came downstairs with the document in hand. "Here," she said, placing it gently on the kitchen counter like she was handing over peace. "We've drawn up a short-term lease, month to month. Just a formality, you know?" I didn't move. "You'll pay utilities directly to us," she added, "since everything's bundled in our names now. The rent's just enough to help us cover maintenance and our portion of the mortgage." My voice barely found itself. "My portion of the mortgage?" She tapped the paper. "Oh, you hadn't seen the refinance terms?" "No." "Oh," she said again with fake surprise. "Well, the old documents were outdated anyway. You weren't listed as an active resident, so it made things easier to consolidate." Consolidate? As if my life's work was now a spreadsheet. I stared at the lease. The number wasn't ridiculous, but that wasn't the point. "You're asking me to pay rent," I said slowly, "on the home I built." "It's called mutual respect," she said. "We're adults. Adults contribute." I looked at my son. "Is this how it's going to be?" He didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and walked out the front door. I followed him out, footsteps crunching through slush. "You really signed over everything?" I asked. He paused at the car. "We needed to refinance," he said. "The market's unstable. And we thought it'd be easier without complications." "I'm a complication now?" He opened the door. "Look, just sign it. It's cleaner for everyone." He got in and drove off. Inside, she'd lit more incense. The whole place smelled like eucalyptus and lavender lies. I walked past the kitchen and opened the drawer again. Empty. Where my folder used to be, a new label sat, herbals and crystals. I closed it, walked to the garage. The cabinet where I kept backups, empty too. But one thing still sat in the corner, untouched. My old red metal toolbox. Inside, wrapped in plastic, a brass key. The lockbox key. I hadn't opened that in years, but I would now. She returned to the kitchen with a smirk and slid a fresh document across the counter. Sign this if you want to keep staying through New Year. Church bulletin said silent night, but their whispers were loud. Sunday morning. I dressed like I always had. Gray slacks, flannel tucked in, coat brushed clean. I stepped into the foyer with my Bible in hand, the same one Margaret gave me on our 5th anniversary. Jess stood by the mirror, adjusting her hair. "You're going dressed like that?" she asked. I paused. "Like what?" She shrugged. "It's just, the coat's a bit worn." My son stepped out behind her, tie half done, looking anywhere but at me. "I've worn this to church for 20 years, I said. "Right," she mumbled. "But back then you were hosting." That one word stung. Hosting. As if the Christmas dinners, backyard baptisms, youth choir practices were all just events I once sponsored, not part of my home. Now I was an event they were phasing out. The car ride was cold even with the heater running. Jess and my son whispered in the front. I sat in the back, next to my granddaughter who stared at her phone the whole way. We pulled into the church lot. Familiar faces. Mr. Graves, the Carson family, Pastor Lee. Everyone dressed in red or green, smiling beneath the December sun. I stepped out slowly. A few nodded at me, but something in their eyes had changed. Less warmth, more hesitation. Inside, the sanctuary was filled with poinsettias and gold ribbon. The bulletin read, "The spirit of peace, the gift of home." I sat in my usual pew, third from the front, aisle side, but when Jess came in, she paused. "Let's scoot back," she whispered to my son. Too close to the front, they moved. 4 rows back, I sat alone. During fellowship, while cookies and cider passed around, I noticed Pastor Lee looking my way. He eventually walked over. "Everything all right at home, brother?" he asked, voice low. I gave him a polite smile. "Why wouldn't it be?" He hesitated. "I only ask because, well, Jess mentioned some adjustments. Said you're taking time to transition." "Transition into what?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. I didn't press. Just wanted to check in. I nodded and turned away. But I heard it behind me. Murmurs from the refreshment table. Didn't know he was renting now. Must be hard losing everything so late in life. And then the worst one, he should have planned better. No will, maybe? That's when I snapped. I walked over to the circle. "Anyone here got questions, ask me directly." Mr. Graves cleared his throat. "It's none of our business, Carl." "No, apparently it is," I said. "Since lies are making the rounds faster than the cider." Jess stepped in. "Dad, maybe this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said. "Y'all think I'm just some sad old man squatting in his kid's house?" Someone gasped. Jess turned red. My son stood frozen. I pulled the manila envelope from my coat, the one Jess had dropped at Christmas. "This here is an eviction notice," I said. "Filed by the people who moved into my house." Dead silence, I continued. "You want the truth? Ask them how the mortgage changed without my signature. Ask them how a house I paid for in cash suddenly has a lien." Jess tried to interrupt, but I turned. "Not now. You had your chance to speak in court. That's where we're going next." Gasps echoed through the room. Pastor Lee raised his hand. "Let's calm—" "No," I said. "Let's tell the truth. The woman standing here next to my son wants me out of the house I built. And he's letting her." Jess's voice cracked. "You're twisting things." I stepped closer. "I may be old, but I'm not dead. And I'm not leaving." Later, as we walked out, no one met my eyes. Even the kids stopped handing out candy canes at the door. At the car, Jess fumed. "What the hell was that?" "The truth," I said. "You embarrassed us." "No," I said, calm. "You embarrassed yourselves. I just brought a mirror." My son got in the car without a word. My granddaughter, tears in her eyes, said softly, "Is it true?" I nodded. "More than you know." She sat beside me in the back, quiet the whole ride home. "She wanted you to have family. Not everything. And you—" I turned to Jess. "We're never written into anything." "You don't know that," she snapped. "Oh, I do. Because now I've got her voice. And the signature to match." Later that night, I sat in the garage again, going through the rest of the canister contents. Buried deep inside was something I'd forgotten we ever kept. A handwritten letter from Margaret labeled, "For When They Turn." The ink was faint. But the message was loud. Carl, if they turn on you, don't stay quiet. You always protected us. Now protect yourself. Use what we kept. Don't give them the house. They don't deserve it. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the red folder, the one now bursting with paper, proof, and purpose. The lawyer called just before midnight. Carl, I've reviewed the documents. You're sitting on a fraud case, but brace yourself. If you push, they might come harder. At the town diner, the waitress handed me the check with a note. I hadn't stepped into Miller's diner since Margaret passed. That booth by the window still had her name etched in the wood from the Valentine's special 5 years ago. She'd laughed when the waitress carved it with a butter knife. Just so no one forgets me, she said. I slid into that booth again now, alone, coat zipped, folder beside me. I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there to confirm a rumor. The waitress, Laney, brought me coffee and placed the check face down with a little smile. You sure you're okay, Mr. Evans? She asked. I looked up. Why? She leaned in, voice soft. There was a woman in here yesterday. Said you were moving out soon. She was asking about local listings. Said something about transferring the house to a business account. My stomach dropped. Did she give a name? Laney nodded. Jessica Evans. She said she and her husband were handling your affairs now. Affairs. She made it sound like I'd been moved to a nursing home and was no longer involved. I flipped the check. On the back, Laney had scribbled, check the MLS. I left a tip, nodded once, and drove straight to the local real estate office. The secretary barely looked up. I'm looking for a listing, I said. 1140 Winton Ridge Drive. She tapped keys, blinked twice. Yes, that property was listed as a private sale 2 weeks ago, under Evans LLC. I froze. Can I see the listing details? Are you the owner? I built it, I said flatly. She raised an eyebrow but turned the screen. There it was. My home. My porch, my fireplace, my wife's garden now overgrown and carelessly cropped in the image. Under contract, it read, pending financing. I took a photo of the screen. Who's the agent? She handed me a business card. I walked out, heart hammering. That evening, I knocked on the door of Sandler Realty. Inside, a young woman sat by the window typing. She looked up, startled. Can I help you? You're the listing agent for Winton Ridge? She stood. I'd have to confirm. I pulled out the photo. Don't bother. I know it's you. She took a breath. I was told everything was above board. Did they show you a power of attorney? Yes. Dated after my wife's death? She didn't answer. You're about to broker the sale of stolen property. Her face went white. I suggest you freeze the deal. Now. That night, back home, Jess was waiting in the living room. She held a letter in her hand. What did you say to the agent? She'll be filing a fraud report. Jess didn't flinch. Then you leave us no choice. She handed me the letter. A cease and desist, filed by a law firm in her cousin's name. Claiming harassment, slander, and interference with financial affairs. I laughed. Is this supposed to scare me? It should, she said. Because next time it'll be an eviction with law enforcement. Just then, headlights swept across the window. My son walked in, silent, behind him. 2 officers. The taller cop stepped forward. Mr. Evans? That's me. We received a complaint of trespassing. The homeowner stated you no longer reside here legally. Jess smiled faintly behind them. I own this house, I said. Do you have proof? I walked to the garage, grabbed the red folder, and handed it to them. Deed audio transcript. Fraud report. The officers stepped aside to read. I watched Jess's expression shift as they turned each page. 5 minutes later, the older officer cleared his throat. We'll need to take this up with civil court. For now, Mr. Evans stays. Jess's face went red. My son didn't meet my eyes. As they left, the younger officer looked at me. Sir, he said quietly, you should get a restraining order, fast. The lawyer called the next morning. We found something in their LLC filings. It's worse than we thought. The house isn't just listed. It's collateral. I froze every account I ever co-signed. The silence over breakfast was unbearable. No yoga music. No smoothie blender. No laughter. Just the sound of clinking spoons and tension thick enough to chew. Jess scrolled through her phone, smirking quietly. Amazon orders late again, she muttered, not even looking at me. My son sat across the table, half awake, half ashamed. Or maybe just bored. I took a slow sip of coffee. Then I placed 3 envelopes on the table, one in front of each of them. They froze. "What's this?" she asked. "Bank statements," I said. "As of this morning." She flipped it open. "What the? Your cards declined, right?" Her eyes snapped to mine. "You did this?" "I closed every co-signed account. Every shared utility. Every emergency contact I ever gave gone. You can't." "I just did. The night before. I'd driven to 3 separate banks. I sat down with old friends. Managers I'd known for decades. I showed them the red folder. I showed them the forged deed. The fraudulent refinance, the POA that was invalid before. The ink dried, and then I gave them a list: joint credit card, cancel, shared emergency fund, freeze, family phone plan, disconnect, auto insurance, remove name, mortgage account access, revoke. They didn't ask questions, they just nodded because they saw what was coming, and because they remembered. Margaret, back at the table. Jess was seething. "You've stranded us," she snapped. "You committed fraud," I replied. My son looked at the paper in his hands, pale. "Dad, the kids' school auto debits come from that account." "I know," I said. "You should have thought of that before evicting the man who funded it." "You're overreacting," Jess hissed. "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming." "Reclaiming what?" "My name, my credit, my peace." She stood, furious. "This is war." "No," I said quietly. "This is a warning shot." She stormed out. My son followed, but not before pausing at the door. "You didn't have to do this. You already did," I said. "I'm just catching up." That afternoon I visited the utility office. The clerk behind the glass was young, bright-eyed. When I handed her the account number and proof of ownership, she blinked. "You want to remove yourself?" "No," I said. "I want to remove them." I placed the fraud documents on the counter. 20 minutes later, the power bill, water account, and trash service were all transferred, back to my name. The only name that had ever paid them without missing a month. By the evening, the ripple had reached Jess. I came in from the garage to find her on the phone with Amazon customer service, voice raised, words sharp. "I need this account restored. There's medication and school supplies," and she turned to me, lowering the phone. "You canceled Prime?" "I canceled everything." She turned back to the call. Then her laptop pinged, email. "Access denied." Another ping. Another denial. She dropped the phone. "You're punishing the children." "No," I said. "You are." The symbolic object now sat on my desk. The red folder, thick with new confirmations. Every account closed. Every access revoked. I opened it slowly and slid in the final email. Evans Family LLC, frozen due to legal review. The next morning, I drove to Pastor Lee's house. He answered the door, surprised. "Carl, I need a favor." He waved me in. "I need to make something public," I said. He hesitated. "I'm not asking for a platform. Just a reading. A statement," he nodded. "You can speak next Sunday, before the choir." "Thank you," I said. "But I won't be reading it." "Who will?" "My granddaughter." That evening, I received a knock at the door. Not my son, not Jess. It was the gas company. "Sir, someone tried to shut off your service again. If your child tried to financially erase you, would you strike back or stay silent?" They called Adult Protective Services. The knock came mid-morning, 3 short raps. Official, cold. I opened the door to find a woman in a gray windbreaker, clipboard in hand, badge around her neck. "Mr. Carl Evans?" she asked. "Yes. My name's Dana Morris. I'm with Adult Protective Services. Mind if I come in?" I stepped aside slowly. "Someone reported concern for your welfare," she said. "Allegations of cognitive decline, financial confusion, and possible unsafe living conditions." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's standard protocol. I just need to ask you a few questions." That night I sat alone in the garage. The brass key felt heavy in my hand. The old lockbox rested beneath a stack of dusty tarps. I turned the key. Inside, my original deed, utilities receipts, Margaret's will, and something I hadn't seen in years. Our wedding photo tucked behind everything, still framed in wood. I lifted it. They tried to erase my name, but Margaret's handwriting on the back was clear. For Carl, who built this life for all of us. Never let them forget. The next morning, a certified envelope arrived. Inside, an official 30-day notice signed by my son. My bank called. Did you authorize this mortgage? The voice on the phone was too cheerful for what he said next. Mr. Evans, we're just calling to confirm. Did you authorize the refinance on 1140 Winton Ridge Drive this past September? I didn't answer right away. I was holding Margaret's will in one hand, the original deed in the other. Mr. Evans? No, I said slowly. I didn't authorize anything. Well, he said, the smile fading from his tone, that's concerning. Because it cleared 3 months ago. I stared at the brass key still lying on the desk. I need to see the documents. Every page. Today. The drive to the bank was short but felt endless. Inside, the loan officer, a young man named Trent with slicked hair and an apologetic smile, met me in a private room. I pulled everything you asked for, he said, placing a thick folder on the desk. This is the complete refinance packet. I opened it. There it was, my name, printed cleanly across the signature line, and beside it, my signature. Only it wasn't. Not the slope of the E, not the curl of the V. I'd signed thousands of checks, dozens of contracts, never once like that. This isn't mine, I said. Trent glanced around nervously. It matched previous records. Which records? The ones uploaded by the new primary account holder, Jessica Evans. I leaned forward. There's no Jessica Evans on the deed. This house was under Carl and Margaret Evans, no one else. He swallowed. Sir, we were told Margaret passed. And Jessica presented a power of attorney, notarized. I froze. A power of attorney. That document, I said. Show me that one. 3 pages in, I found it, stamped, signed, dated, 2 weeks before Margaret's passing. The signature? Mine, except it wasn't. My chest tightened. This is forged. Trent looked pale. Sir, if that's true, you'll need to file a fraud report immediately. But I have to warn you, this will trigger an investigation. Your son could be named in the report. He already named himself, I said, pushing the folder back. I sat in my truck for 15 minutes, hands trembling on the steering wheel. They hadn't just tricked me. They'd started this before Margaret passed. Before the grief even had time to settle. They were plotting to take the roof I built. Son, who I taught how to ride a bike on that. Driveway, my son, who I let move in after he lost his job. And 2020, my son, who now sat in my house calling me a guest. That evening, I walked into the living room and placed the folder on the coffee table. Jess looked up from her laptop. What's that? Your lies. She stood slowly. Excuse me? You forged my signature, she scoffed. Prove it. I will. My son entered from the hallway, drying his hands. What's going on? I turned to him. You filed a fraudulent refinance with a forged power of attorney. You've committed real estate fraud. His mouth dropped open. Jess tried to laugh. You're overreacting. I stepped closer. You stole my name. That's not a mistake. That's a felony. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said. It was the only way we could get approved. The market was hot. We couldn't wait. And now you'll burn, I said. They didn't say a word as I walked out and shut the garage behind me. Inside, I sat at my workbench, heart still racing. The symbolic object sat beside me. The red folder I'd pulled from the lockbox, now growing thicker with evidence, every receipt, every notarized paper I had left from decades of ownership, stacked and labeled. I didn't know law, but I knew paper trails. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the glass looked over my documents carefully. You're saying this POA is fake? She asked. Yes, I said. She tapped the screen. It's already flagged. Someone else raised concern last month. A notary was suspended for suspicious signings, this one included. I blinked. Wait, who flagged it? She checked. It was filed anonymously, but the note said, potential elder fraud. For a moment I breathed. Someone had seen this coming. Someone had tried to help. The clerk leaned closer and said, You'll want to talk to the title examiner. There's more. You were removed from the deed. Before your wife passed, the garage floor wasn't just concrete, it was my vault. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallway like a man trapped in someone else's house, because I was. My house. My name, my roof, and yet I had no key to the truth anymore, except for one. In the corner of the garage, underneath an old tarp and spare lumber, was the loose concrete tile. I laid it 20 years ago after burying the waterproof canister Margaret and I called our failsafe. She'd laughed back then. You planning for war, Carl? No, I said, sealing the container. Just bad weather. Tonight, the weather was betrayal. I pried the tile open, slid the plastic canister out, and opened it on the bench. Inside, a sealed envelope marked with Margaret's cursive. Inside that, her original will, and beneath it, a notarized transfer deed. Dated 8 months before she died. She had transferred her share of the house solely to me. There it was. Black and white, sealed and legal. I stared at her handwriting. Margaret had known something or feared something. The next morning, I returned to the county clerk with the documents in hand. The title examiner, an older woman with sharp glasses and a voice that didn't flinch, met me in a back room. I remember this case, she said, scanning the transfer deed. Your wife made this transfer in person. We have her thumbprint and audio confirmation. She never told me, I said. She paused. Maybe she couldn't. Some spouses fear what happens if they speak. That settled into my chest like ice. What about the current deed? I asked. She pulled it up on her screen. You were removed from joint ownership 2 weeks after her passing. New deed filed by Jessica Evans. Use the power of attorney again. After Margaret died, she nodded grimly, which legally invalidates it. A POA ends the moment the principal passes. So not only had they forged a signature, they used an expired legal instrument to strip my name from my home. They'd planned this betrayal before Margaret's death and executed it after, using forged documents and expired authority. As I left the building, the weight of it nearly buckled my knees. But then I remembered something else. The recording. A week before she passed, Margaret had been bedridden, and during one of our final evenings together, she asked me to record her, to make sure I had her wishes and her voice. I'd saved it on an old USB, tucked in my nightstand. Back home, I plugged the USB into my laptop and hit play. Her voice came through, fragile, soft but steady. If I go before Carl, she said, he is to keep this home. No matter what Jessica says, this is his house. Tears welled in my eyes. I copied the file 3 times, uploaded it to the cloud, emailed it to myself, then backed it up on a second drive. They wanted to erase me, but they didn't count on her voice echoing through time. I walked into the kitchen and found Jess unloading groceries. She didn't look up. Need anything? She asked flatly. I placed the flash drive on the counter. What's this? She said, Margaret, I replied. You'll want to hear what she thinks about your lease. She paled. You recorded her? She recorded you. Before you even started. Jess reached for the drive, but I slid it back into my pocket. Too late, I said. Already duplicated. She clenched her jaw. You're bluffing. I don't need to bluff. I've got deeds. I've got recordings. And soon I'll have a court date. That was when my son entered. What's going on? I faced him fully. Your mother gave me this house. You forged me out of it, Dad. We sat in the living room. I made coffee. She took notes. Asked about my finances, medical history, daily habits, I answered clearly, methodically. She looked around the room, saw the red folder on the table neatly stacked with legal documents and recordings. What's this? She asked. I slid it to her. The truth, I said. She read silently. Pages turned. Eyes narrowed. 10 minutes later, she looked up. Mr. Evans, who do you think made the report? I didn't answer, because I already knew. Jess returned home that afternoon, sunglasses on, grocery bag in hand. You really gonna sick the law on us? She asked without looking at me. You started it, I said. That lady with the clipboard. She didn't seem too impressed. She read the evidence. Jess dumped the groceries hard on the counter. Let me be clear, she said, voice low. If you try to take this house back, we will claim elder abuse. Mental incompetence. We'll take it all public. You already did, I replied. At church. At the diner. At the courthouse. You think that little flash drive makes you untouchable? No, I said, but Margaret's voice will outlive your lies. That night, I received an email from the utility company. Attempt to cancel service blocked. Account holder match failed. They'd tried again, cutting off my heat in December. The next morning, APS worker Dana called. I reviewed everything you sent, she said. Mr. Evans, I'm closing your case, but I have a question. Go ahead. That voicemail from your wife, the one confirming the house transfer. Did you ever register that with an estate attorney? No, you should, she said. Because if this escalates to a conservatorship hearing, you'll need everything in place. Conservatorship? I asked. They're preparing it, she said. I've seen it before. They'll claim you're not fit to manage your affairs. A slow breath escaped my lungs. They want control of the estate, I said. Not just that, she replied. They want you out of the way. In the evening, I found a strange man on the front porch. Suit, clipboard, no warmth. I'm from Golden Horizon Senior Placement. I was told to do an intake consult. By who? I asked. He checked his form. Jessica Evans. She said you were considering assisted living. I laughed, long and cold. She didn't tell you she was being investigated for fraud? The man stepped back. No. I'll cancel this. You do that. Later that night, I opened the mailbox and found a new document. My son had filed for emergency power of attorney, court hearing set for Thursday. Judge read from a tablet, then stopped. Sir, do you know this woman? The courtroom felt colder than any winter morning. The polished wood, the empty pews, the faint scent of stale coffee from the clerk's desk. It all blurred into the background as I sat at the defendant's table. 72-year-old man being treated like a liability. Jess sat 2 rows behind me, arms crossed. My son beside her, suit too tight, eyes heavy. Across the room stood their lawyer, young and overconfident. The judge entered. Gavel dropped. Silence held. Carl Evans, he began. This hearing concerns an emergency petition filed by your son, Derek Evans, to be granted medical and financial power of attorney, citing concerns of cognitive decline, estate mismanagement, and, he paused, potential psychological instability. I didn't flinch because I had something they didn't. I stood when asked to speak. Your Honor, I said, before any assumptions are made, I ask permission to submit evidence into the record. The judge nodded. From my briefcase, I removed a flash drive. Audio file dated 1 week before my wife's death. Her voice, her intentions clear and unedited. He handed it to the bailiff. Proceed. The courtroom speakers crackled. Then Margaret's voice filled the room. If I go before Carl, he is to keep this home, no matter what Jessica says. This is his house, Jess stiffened. The young lawyer whispered something quickly. The judge turned to them. You were aware of this file? Jess shook her head. That was private. It wasn't meant for, it's legally valid, I said, backed by deed records and notarized property transfers. The judge looked at the clerk. Pull up the title history. Moments passed. Then the judge spoke again. Mr. Evans, can you confirm this woman? He turned the tablet toward me. On screen, a paused video frame of Jess in the kitchen, rehearsing lines. Pay the rent or get out from her. My stomach turned. Where did this come from? The judge asked. Anonymous source, said the clerk. Sent to the court inbox last night. Along with this, another click. Another video. Jess standing in the hallway whispering to someone off screen. If we get him out before January, the second appraisal qualifies. We get the full refinance bump. Jess had been recorded rehearsing the entire betrayal, including the financial incentive if the eviction succeeded. The courtroom buzzed. The judge raised his hand. Order, he turned to Jess. Do you deny this is you? Her mouth opened, then closed. The judge looked back at me. Mr. Evans, I see no grounds for emergency conservatorship. Quite the opposite, he turned to my son. As for you, attempted fraud through forged documents, abuse of expired legal authority, and coercive manipulation of a legal elder's rights. Your conduct is under review. You may face criminal charges. Jess stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. He's lying. He's manipulating all of you. The judge didn't flinch. One more outburst and you'll be removed from the courtroom. She sat, fuming. When we stepped outside, the community was waiting. Neighbors, Pastor Lee, Laney from the diner, even Mr. Graves. They'd heard about the hearing, about the recordings, about the truth. They stood quietly, not as a mob, but as witnesses. Jess tried to push past. One woman shook her head. Another stepped aside. Someone whispered, "Shameful." Another said, "That poor man built that home." And then the line that stuck in the air like smoke. She rehearsed it. She planned to humiliate him. My son stopped on the courthouse steps, looked at me. I didn't know she recorded that. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at him. You handed her the match. Back home, I placed the red folder on the mantel, the symbolic object, no longer a container of panic, but a monument of defense. I removed the Christmas photo from the wall, the one with all of us smiling around the tree. Behind it, I placed a single new image, Margaret's will and the court transcript, proof that dignity once buried could rise again. That night, the lawyer called. We've secured a court order. You can now file a restraining notice and initiate full property restoration. Have you ever watched a courtroom flip when the truth finally crushed the lie? The sheriff handed me 3 folders. Time to fight back. 3 days after the courtroom fallout, the sheriff arrived with more than a knock. He brought authority. He brought truth. And this time it was on my side. Mr. Evans, he said, placing a hand on his belt. We're serving a protective order. Civil restitution documents and a temporary restraining notice. We'll need you to confirm identity and residence ownership. I led him into the house. He saw the photos on the wall, the woodworking plaques still bearing my initials, the bronze service flag from Vietnam folded above the fireplace. Sir, he said after a moment, looks like this place tells its own story. It's all I ever wanted to protect, I replied. He walked me through the 3 folders. Folder 1, Restraining Order, Jessica. Evans barred from the property for 90 days pending fraud investigation. Folder 2, Restitution Suit, Damages for Emotional Distress, Identity Forgery, and Unlawful Asset Manipulation. Folder 3, Emergency Injunction, Sale of the House Halted, LLC Assets Frozen, Bank Movement Monitored. The sheriff nodded toward the front door. They'll be served by end of day, he said, and your locks will be changed by this afternoon. By 4 p.m., a locksmith arrived. I watched as he removed the key cylinder, replaced it, and handed me a fresh set, 2 keys. I put one in my pocket. The other I slid into the small brass box Margaret once used to keep cookie cutters. Symbolic, because from now on, only the people who didn't poison this home would ever hold a copy. By evening, I met with my attorney, Miss Sandra Lee. She wore a dark green suit and glasses that seemed to cut through people's excuses before they spoke. Carl, she said, pointing at the red folder I placed on her desk. This is gold. I'm not looking for gold, I replied. Just dignity, she smiled. Then let's give you both. She laid out a map, an actual printed blueprint of legal retaliation. Phase 1, Protective Barriers. Phase 2, Civil Reversal, Property re-recorded in your name, Utilities rerouted, any residual debt frozen and reassigned. Phase 3, Public Declaration. Press or church, your choice. And Phase 4? I asked. She leaned forward. Legacy, a final act they'll never forget. That night my son returned, alone, no Jess, no excuses. He stood on the porch, didn't even knock. I opened the door. Dad, he said, I lost access to everything. I'm locked out of the house, the bank, even the kids' school portal. Actions have consequences. He looked down. They're calling it fraud now. It is. She told me it was legal. That you were slipping. That we were just protecting the estate. And you believed her over your own father? I didn't want to, he whispered. But she said she had the documents. She had my signature forged. His shoulders slumped. I didn't sign anything. He muttered. You didn't have to. You let her. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photo frame, cracked down the middle. Found this in the garage. Thought you'd want it. It was the last Christmas photo we ever took as a full family. Margaret, me, him, Jess, and the grandkids, everyone smiling. But I could barely recognize the people in that picture anymore. Thanks, I said. Not unkindly, but I didn't invite him in. Not yet. After he left, I placed the broken frame on my desk next to the red folder. 2 things now defined the war. One was the truth. The other was the cost. The next morning, I stood in line at the county office. Property re-recording took less than an hour. The clerk, same woman from before, stamped the documents, scanned my ID and smiled. Welcome home, Mr. Evans. For the first time in months, I breathed deep. As I walked back to the truck, my phone buzzed. It was Sandra. "Carl," she said, "they just defaulted on the second mortgage. Lender's coming after them now." Debt collectors arrived before breakfast. The banging started at 8:15 a.m. Not a knock, banging. The kind of pounding that rattles the glass and sets off your instinct to run or fight. I opened the front door and saw two men in tan jackets, clipboards in hand. "Jessica Evans?" one asked. "No," I said. "She doesn't live here anymore." They exchanged looks. One scribbled on a pad. This address was listed as her primary residence on a secured personal line of credit. $42,000 outstanding. 30 days past due. "Not my problem," I said, "but I suggest you check the new court filing." "She's been served. This house is mine again." They didn't argue, just nodded, left a notice at the mailbox, and walked away. That was the first crack in their facade. It wouldn't be the last. By noon, two more calls came, first from Sandra. "Carl, we traced the LLC Jess created. Turns out she tied it to a business credit card, overdrafted. Issuer is freezing assets. Their accountant just called to verify if the house still counts as equity." "It doesn't," I said. "It never did." Then from Pastor Lee, "Carl, I hate to ask, but Derek's wife came to the church this morning. Asked for help with rent. Claimed they're staying with her sister. Rent.in-law basement, no heat, no space. From mortgage manipulators to renters." Later that day, a beige envelope arrived. Inside, notice from the public school board. Jess had attempted to switch their children's residency to the sister's address. Request denied. Reason: legal guardianship status under review. I stared at the rejection and remembered my granddaughter's quiet question weeks ago. Is it true? Yes. And now, the truth was echoing through every system they once tried to weaponize. At sunset, I saw them, Jess and Derek, parked across the street in a borrowed car, engine off, windows cracked. She was yelling, hands flying. He was slumped behind the wheel, ashamed, cornered. I stood on the porch and watched. They didn't look at me, just peeled away slowly as the headlights blinked on. No destination, no plan, no power. Inside, I returned to the broken photo frame on my desk. Margaret's smile was still intact, even with the crack running through her face. Underneath the glass, I placed a sticky note. They built a house of lies. It collapsed under its own roof. I wasn't being cruel, I was being clear. The next morning, Lainey from the diner called. "Carl, thought you'd want to know. Jess applied here. Said she'd do weekends, tips only. She used to call this place greasy," I said. Lainey chuckled. "Now she's begging for shifts. She get the job?" "We told her we'd think about it," she said carefully. "But no one here's forgotten what she did. Truth's fast in a small town. That night I got a voicemail from Derek. His voice was hoarse. Dad, we lost everything. Jess's parents want us out. I've got job applications out, but I know I don't deserve to ask, but if there's anything left just for the kids." I didn't delete it, but I didn't return it either. Symbolic object, the red folder now held one last item, Margaret's old recipe card. Faded ink, her handwriting still beautiful, her pecan pie. The one Jess once said was too heavy. I pinned it to the fridge, not for baking, for remembrance, because this house was built on real ingredients. Real memories, and now it had no room for shortcuts. That night my granddaughter knocked at the door alone. No luggage, just red eyes and a whisper. "Can I stay here, Grandpa?" Church mic crackled. Would the Evans family like to say something? It was the first Sunday of the new year and the sanctuary buzzed louder than the organ. News spreads fast in a town like ours. By the time I arrived, whispers had already floated through the pews. Not about the weather, not about the choir, but about what had happened in court, in the bank, in the house that now bore only one name. Mine. I hadn't planned on speaking. I just wanted to sit, listen, breathe. But Pastor Lee had other ideas. He stepped up to the pulpit and tapped the microphone. "Before we begin today's message," he said, "a few words need saying. Not by me, by the truth. Every head turned. The Evans family has experienced strain," he continued, choosing his words like a man crossing thin ice. "But what matters in this sanctuary is not whispers, it's witness. Mr. Carl Evans, would you join us?" I walked up slowly. I could feel the eyes. Some were full of sympathy, others curiosity. A few wore guilt for believing the rumors. Jess had planted weeks before. I didn't bring my folder, just one sheet of paper. Margaret's last note. I stood at the mic and cleared my throat. I was never a perfect father. I was never a perfect husband. But I was a builder. I built this home, this life, this family. A pause. Some of you heard things, that I was confused, that I signed things I didn't understand, that I wasn't fit to manage my home. I held up the paper. My wife disagreed. She left me this. I read aloud. Carl, if they turn on you, don't stay quiet. You always protected us. Now protect yourself. Silence. Then murmurs, gasps, a single sniffle from the front row. Then came the crack in the back of the room. Jess stood, not part of the service, not invited, wearing a borrowed coat, arms tight, face drawn thin. I have something to say, she called out. The room froze. Pastor Lee hesitated, then nodded once. She stepped forward like a fallen queen, shoulders high but heart dragging behind. I made mistakes, she said. We made mistakes, that was all she offered. No names, no specifics, no apology, just a deflated, calculated performance. Then she turned to leave, but someone stood in the aisle. Lainey from the diner. She blocked Jess's path. Don't you dare come in here to wash your hands without soap, she said. Voice combat cutting. That man raised this town's youth, built the food pantry, paid for the organ restoration. What have you done but break what wasn't yours? A hush swept the room. Jess tried to speak, but there was no air left. She turned and left the sanctuary, this time for good. After service, people approached me quietly, humbly. Mr. Graves shook my hand. Should have known better, Carl. The Carson twins hugged me. Your granddaughter's in good hands. Pastor Lee placed a hand on my shoulder. Justice doesn't always wear robes, he said. Sometimes it walks through the center aisle. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with my granddaughter. She had unpacked her single backpack, folded her clothes with care, and placed her schoolbooks neatly on the counter. I didn't know it would all fall apart, she said. You didn't break it, I said. She looked down. I missed them, even though they lied. I know. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something small. The turtle. Margaret's old brass turtle paperweight. I found this in Mom's things, she said. Thought it belonged here. She placed it on the center of the table. Symbolic object, returned, broken chain, mended. That night, I wrote a letter, not to my son, not to Jess, but to the lawyer. I requested a modification to my will. Inheritance redirected, no longer to blood, but to truth, a scholarship fund in Margaret's name. For young girls who want to build, not destroy. The following morning, I opened the mailbox and found an envelope addressed in my son's handwriting. Inside, no words. Just a single copy of our old Christmas photo, torn straight down the middle. The Veterans Foundation received a check, signed by me. On Friday morning, I walked into the county office wearing my best coat. Margaret always said I looked like a proper statesman in it. I adjusted the collar, straightened my back, and handed the clerk a sealed envelope. Property transfer request, I said. She opened it, eyebrows raising as she read the beneficiary. You sure about this, Mr. Evans? I nodded. 100%. She took the envelope and stamped the form. 2 signatures. 1 date. The house, my house, no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the Margaret Evans Veteran Scholarship Trust. The building would remain standing, but the deed now ensured it would serve as both a rental for retired veterans and a tutoring center for children of military families. Every corner of that house would breathe. Purpose, not entitlement, not betrayal. Legacy. Later that afternoon, I walked through every room one last time. The red folder sat on the kitchen counter. Now slim, no more chaos inside. Only closure. I placed the brass turtle on top of it, polished and restored. Then I taped a note beside it. The slowest ones win the race, not by speed but by truth. That night, I invited Pastor Lee, Lainey, Mr. Graves, and Sandra over for coffee. My granddaughter sat beside me on the couch, her head resting on my arm as the fire cracked behind us. I didn't know you'd go this far, Pastor Lee said. Looking around the home, I didn't either, I admitted. But Margaret always said a real house isn't just for living, it's for teaching. I turned to Sandra. Make sure the transfer is irreversible. No loopholes. No way back for them, she nodded. Done. This home is bulletproof now. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Derek. No words, just a photo. Him, sitting on a mattress in what looked like a storage unit. Kids asleep behind him. Jess nowhere in sight, and below it, I was wrong. I was weak. I'm sorry, Dad. For the first time in a long while, I cried. Not because of the pain, but because he finally used the word I'd been waiting for. Dad. The next morning, Sandra arrived in a rush. Carl, she said, handing me her phone. You need to see this. An email forwarded from a private investigator. Subject line, pre-death recordings, Margaret's hidden voice notes. Attached, 3 recordings. Margaret had made on her old phone, found in a cloud backup tied to her maiden name. She had known. All along, I pressed play. They're planning something, Carl. I overheard Jess talking about refinancing. She thinks I don't understand tech, but I heard her say it. Once she's gone, he's too soft to stop us. Next file. I moved the deed. I'm transferring my share early. If anything happens, the lockbox in the garage holds the real protection. Final file. And if you hear this, Carl, it means they did what I feared. But I believe in you. You were never weak, never. Show them who raised this family. Show them what legacy really means. I clutched the phone. Eyes hot. She had protected me even in silence, even in death. Her voice wasn't just proof, it was prophecy. That night, I returned to the county office, not to undo the transfer, but to add to it. The red folder, now finalized, would be placed in a time capsule, sealed in the foundation of the tutoring center. Let the next generation dig it up and learn how a father fights and how a wife still protects long after she's gone. The next morning, my granddaughter asked, "Will they ever come back?" I answered, "If they do, it won't be for the house. It'll be for healing." My son stood outside in the snow, holding the shattered photo frame. It had been 2 weeks since the deed was transferred, since the keys changed hands, since the town stopped whispering and started watching me with something close to respect again. But that morning, through the icy blur of the front window, I saw him, standing on the porch in a borrowed coat, holding the same photo frame he had once torn in silence. My son. I opened the door, but I didn't speak. He did. "Dad, please." His voice cracked. Wind bit at his face. "I know what we did. I know how far it went. But I'm asking you, not for me, for the kids." He held up the frame like it was proof of something. "She doesn't even sleep anymore. My daughter, your granddaughter. She says she doesn't feel safe unless she's in this house." "She's already here," I said. "She's the only one who never lied." He nodded, ashamed. "I'm not asking for a room or a second chance. I'm just asking if you can point me in the right direction." I stepped aside and let him in. Not as a resident, not as a son, but as a man finally learning what consequences look like. He sat on the edge of the old couch, the turtle paperweight glinting in the firelight beside him. "You know I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "You didn't stop it," I replied. "No," he whispered. "I didn't." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original refinance packet, signed by Jess, falsified, POA. His name nowhere on the signature page. I told her not to. But she said it was already done. "Why bring it to me now?" I asked. "Because I don't want to carry it anymore," he said. "I want to let go." I unfolded the document. Burned edges, a symbol of everything that was broken. I held it over the fireplace for a moment, then stopped. "I'm not going to burn this," I said. "I'm going to seal it. In the foundation." "Why?" he asked. "So you never forget what paper can cost." He stood slowly, eyes rimmed red. "I've been looking for work." "Find something honest," I said. "I'll take whatever I can get." "I have a rule now," I said. "I don't fund adults who lie. But I do invest in children who can learn." He looked up. "I opened a fund," I continued, Margaret's name, "for the grandkids. For education, for things built clean. Not for us, not for you, but we're their parents." "No," I said. "You were. Now you're learning how to be again." He turned to leave but paused. "If Jess ever calls, Just know I'm not with her. I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. That night, my granddaughter helped me decorate what used to be her parents' old room. Fresh coat of paint, a bookshelf, a lock on the inside of the door, not to keep people out, but to make her feel like she finally had her own space. She taped a photo above the bed, her and Margaret in the garden. She taught me how to make lavender oil, she said. She taught me how to survive a storm, I replied. Later, I found a Christmas card by the mailbox, no return address. Inside, one line. We lost everything, but maybe it's what we needed to find ourselves. I placed it in a drawer, not to keep it, but to remind me what empty words look like. The next morning, Lainey called. Carl, the town hall wants to honor you at the community dinner. They said it's time people remembered who really built this town. Christmas again. Empty chair, full table. The community dinner was held in the high school gym, like it had been for decades. Long tables lined with paper tablecloths, foil-covered casseroles, homemade pies, and name tags stuck to everyone's chest whether they needed them or not. It was Margaret's favorite tradition, and for the first time since she passed, I walked in not as someone forgotten, but as someone remembered. People stood, some clapped, others just nodded. Respectful. Lainey waved from the dessert table. Pastor Lee gestured toward the front. Mr. Graves pulled out a chair. We saved your spot, Carl. Halfway through the evening, Pastor Lee stepped to the mic. Before we close tonight, he said, we'd like to recognize someone. Not for what he endured, but for how he endured it. He waved me up, and applause filled the room, hesitant at first, then growing. I stepped forward slowly, turtle paperweight in hand. Just like Margaret used to carry her hymn book, tight against her chest. Like it held answers I didn't plan to speak, I said, my voice steady. But I've learned that silence only protects the guilty. The room went still. I was betrayed, not by strangers, by family. And I almost stayed quiet because of that word, family. Because it felt heavier than truth. But truth doesn't get lighter if you ignore it. It gets buried. I held up the paperweight. This used to sit on a desk in my home. Now it'll sit in the tutoring center we're opening in Margaret's name. For children who are taught to build instead of break. Murmurs, nods, a tear or two. Then I stepped down, back at my table. My granddaughter squeezed my hand. You did it, she whispered. No, I said. We did. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key, one of the new ones I'd made. I want to give this to someone someday, she said. The way you gave it to me. You will, I said. Just make sure they earn it. Outside, snow began to fall. The town was quiet, peaceful, and then I saw them. Across the street, standing beside a borrowed sedan. Derek and Jess. She didn't approach. He did. No words, just a slow nod. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but truth. I turned and walked home. Inside, I placed the turtle back on the mantel. Then, I reached for a small wooden plaque I'd been carving in the garage for weeks. It read, built by hand, kept by honor. I mounted it above the front door. Symbolic object. Final evolution. Because this home would never be about who lived in it and would be about why it was worth fighting for. Later that night, I tucked my granddaughter into bed. She looked up at me, eyes still bright. Do you miss them? Yes, I said. But not the way they were. I miss the way they could have been. She nodded as if she understood, and maybe somehow she did. The camera pulls back. House lit from within, plaque shining above the door. A granddaughter safe inside, and a father standing guard with nothing left to prove. What would you do if your own child tried to erase your name from your home? Would you let them, or show them what legacy really means?